So the New York Times wrote an article that's basically a profile of a neo-Nazi living in the Midwest. So the article's titled "A Voice of Hate in America's Heartland." And there was a really, really big backlash to this article. One article just lays out tweets from high-profile people, and the title of this article is "New York Times Accused of Normalizing White Nationalism in, quote, Nazi Sympathizer Profile." The profile follows Tony Hoveter, a newlywed who loves Seinfeld and Panera Bread and also believes the Holocaust was overblown. So I read the original New York Times piece, and I have to admit, I'm not sure how to feel about it. And I wanted to lay out my thoughts here for everybody and see what you think. So there's a few angles to discuss this from. One of them is, you read through the article, and yeah, you do get the sense they focus on a lot of the mundane details of the life of somebody who they're portraying as otherwise normal, except that they want to exterminate everybody that's, Jewish and black or a person of color or not exactly like them. So there is something that feels gross about that. And then there's also the reality that, I can't imagine a similar article written where, for example, I don't know, they talk to like a Marxist organizer, or they talk to somebody from Antifa, or they talk to even like a leader of Democratic Socialists. And by the way, just to be clear, I'm not saying that the Nazis and Democratic Socialists, same thing, not even close, nowhere remotely close. One group I think is pretty much right, and the other one is hateful and disgusting. But so I'm not equating them. But what I'm saying is, I don't think the New York Times, they view right-wing activism, no matter how extreme, as like inherently sexy. And it's not just the New York Times. I feel like it's most of the media. Like, ooh, right-wing activism. Like they covered the Richard Spencer, gathering where he gave a speech and everybody was fucking Zig Heiling in the audience. They covered that and they were like, ooh, let's talk about this endlessly. None of the mainstream media outlets had a single camera at any of the giant DSA gatherings that have been happening since the election. So again, right-wing activism, inherently sexy and interesting, and let's talk about it. Left-wing activism, they act like it doesn't exist. They literally try to wash it from history. I mean, they ran the article, as Justice Democrats, we have over 30 candidates. We're primarying people everywhere in Congress and the Senate. It's the Bernie wing fighting back against the Hillary wing. Politico runs an article. Oh, the Bernie wing has given the Hillary wing a pass. The exact opposite, the exact fucking opposite is happening. What are you talking about? From day one after the election, we've worked every day as hard as we could. We couldn't have done more, and you fucking ignore it. So yes, I get that fucking sense of like, fuck you, New York Times. Like, why? Why are you intent on sucking? Why do you not cover the left, but you cover the extreme right? And again, if you read through the article, you'll notice, I certainly noticed, they do, he likes Seinfeld, he fucking eats Panera Bread, he was in a band, so you get the sense of, why are you fucking talking about this guy with this horrific ideology as if, I guess he's somewhat normal. So that's the argument against what the New York Times did here. But there is an argument in favor of what they did here. Now, they would argue, listen, you could say that we're normalizing them. We're not fucking normalizing them. The title of the article was, A Voice of Hate in America's Heartland. And then there are parts of the article where they go on and it's subtle but clear, jabs on the ideology. The guy fucking, praises Hitler, casually talks about how Hitler, not so bad. So they are fighting back against it. I mean, it might be too subtle for some people's taste, but, even though it was subtle to an extent, when I read it, I did see the parts where I'm like, they're clearly against this guy. I don't think it's really up in the air. Now, you could argue you didn't counter-argue effectively enough, and it didn't have the same level of outrage that it should, or what have you. But it was against them. It's not like the New York Times suddenly woke up and was like, Himmler, Goebbels, kind of awesome. Didn't happen, okay? So that seems like a little bit of a straw man of the New York Times position. But furthermore, there is a little bit of hypocrisy here too, because it certainly is the case that the majority of people on the left, myself included in this, when we look at a profile of somebody, and The Nation had one of these not that long ago, a profile of somebody who joined ISIS, okay? And they explain, this person lives in this town. They live in extreme poverty. They have zero opportunity. The U.S. has been raining down bombs on this town for months on end. Their best friend was taken out. The mother was taken out. They had no option, basically. But when, a hateful group came along and said, we will avenge the deaths of your loved ones. You live in extreme poverty. Bombs have been raining down on you. People come around and they say, hey, we're on your side and we're going to fight back against the people who are ruining your life. That group could be ISIS. That group could be Al-Qaeda. That group could be the Taliban. And so the person joins them. The right looks at those articles and what do they say? Liberals sympathizing with Al-Qaeda. Why are you going soft on them and humanizing them? That's what the right says. That is kind of a similar argument that's being made in this case against the article that's showing this Nazi who lives in the Midwest. And so the question really comes down to, do you genuinely view the article as, intentionally or not, let's say, being sympathetic to and justifying and rationalizing the extremism of the far right? Or do you view the article as attempting, successfully or not, let's say, to give context and perspective and backstory as to what can lead an otherwise normal person to, join an extremist group? I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest. I really don't. Because I do see both sides of that argument very clearly. Very clearly. And in the case of this New York Times article, I think it's up in the air as to what your take on it is. But, I have seen articles, there's one by Mother Jones, that in no uncertain terms was like a fluff piece of Richard Spencer, who's a neo-Nazi. I don't think there's any room for that. None. But this article specifically, I don't know. I don't know what my take on it is. But those are the two sides of the argument as I see it. I tried to lay them out as clearly as possible. I did a Twitter poll on this, by the way. I think 53% of you or thereabouts said the New York Times was sympathetic and fuck them. It's fucked up. And then it was split between I don't know and the remainder of the percentage points was split between I don't know how I feel about it or no, calm down. They weren't glorifying or justifying Nazis. But yeah, I do find that the standards do tend to flip on both sides of the aisle here. You will find that the right will malign similar left-wing articles that give context and backstory and humanity to somebody who joins ISIS or somebody who ends up joining a gang like the Crips or the Bloods. They come from a low economic standpoint. They're born in extreme poverty. The sociological situation they're born in, it's there's no other out, so they join the Crips or the Bloods or MS-13 or whatever the case is. The right will malign those articles that explain the radicalization of people who join a gang or people who join ISIS or something. But now it looks like the left is maligning articles that try to give backstory and context to somebody who's otherwise normal, who then ends up becoming an extremist and joining a neo-Nazi movement. So, curious what all you guys think. Those are the two sides as I see them. Have at it.